Abandoned malls are more than just empty buildings. They're snapshots of forgotten lives frozen in time. But what if those lives never truly left? In these chilling tales, we explore the hidden horrors lurking behind locked doors, beneath the flickering neon lights of a silent arcade, and in the eerie stillness of desolate food courts. From a night guard's encounter with a mannequin that wasn't quite lifeless to the haunting echo of laughter in a forgotten playroom, these stories will make you think twice about stepping into the shadows of the past. And remember, some places are abandoned for a ra. Story number 1, The Last Shopper. I thought working the night shift in an abandoned mall would be an easy gig. Quiet, simple, and just me wandering around an empty building for a paycheck. Turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. It all started because I needed money fast. Bills were piling up and this job sounded like a dream. 8 hours alone in a mall that had been shut down for years. No annoying customers, no co-workers, just me and the silence. The hiring manager barely even asked questions. He just handed me the keys, gave me a quick tour and said, "Don't let anyone in." Simple enough, right? The mall itself was sad. The tiles were cracked. The paint on the walls had faded into this weird mix of pastel pink and green, and the food court still smelled faintly of grease despite being empty for years. A few stores had mannequins left in the windows, their clothes outdated and covered in a thick layer of dust. Honestly, it was kind of depressing, but I figured it'd make the nights go by faster. The first shift was uneventful. I walked the halls, checked the locks on all the doors, and spent most of the time scrolling through my phone. The only sound was the occasional creak of the building settling, easy money. But by the second night, things started to feel off. I was walking past the food court when I heard footsteps. At first, I thought they were mine, echoing off the walls. But then I stopped walking and the footsteps didn't. They were soft, like sneakers scuffing against the tile. I shone my flashlight around, but there was no one there. The sound stopped as quickly as it had started, and I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Empty places can mess with your head, right? But later that night, I passed by an old department store and saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a mannequin standing just behind the glass door. It wasn't there the night before, I was sure of it. It was dressed in a faded red blazer, its face blank and expressionless, its head tilted slightly to the side like it was watching me. The doors were locked, so I figured maybe someone had moved it before the mall shut down and I hadn't noticed. Still, it creeped me out. By the third night, I was on edge. And then the mannequin moved. This time, it wasn't near the door. It was all the way in the back of the store, standing in the middle of the checkout area. Its head was tilted back, as if staring at the ceiling. I stood there for a good minute, trying to make sense of it. The doors were still locked. No one else had access to the mall. So how had it moved? That's when I started hearing the whispers. They were faint at first, like someone mumbling just out of earshot. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded angry. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a vent somewhere in the building. But the whispers followed me wherever I went. By the end of the shift, I was practically jogging through my rounds, desperate to get out of there. The fourth night was the worst. I was walking down the main corridor when I saw a shadow dart across the hall ahead of me. My heart stopped. "Hello," I called out, shining my flashlight toward the spot. Nothing. I kept moving, trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then, as I passed a store window, I saw it. A tall, dark figure standing behind me in the reflection. I spun around, but no one was there. I was done. I decided that would be my last night. But the mall wasn't done with me. I was finishing my last patrol when I heard a knock. Soft at first, coming from the glass doors of the department store. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. When I turned to look, I saw it. The mannequin. It was standing right up against the glass, its head now tilted forward like it was staring straight at me. The lights flickered, and in the brief moment of darkness, the mannequin was gone. I bolted. I sprinted through the halls, my footsteps echoing as I ran for the exit. But just as I reached the food court, I skidded to a stop. It was there. Not the mannequin, but something much worse. It looked like a nightmare brought to life. A tangled mass of mannequin parts stitched together into some horrifyingly unnatural shape. Its legs didn't match, its arms jutted out at weird angles, and its face, it didn't even have one. But I could feel it staring at me. It started moving toward me, its jerky, uneven steps scraping against the tile. I ran as fast as I could, bursting out of the mall and into the night. I didn't even stop to lock the door behind me. That was my last shift, but even now, I can't shake the feeling that it followed me. Sometimes, when I walk past a store window, I catch a glimpse of something in the reflection, something tall and twisted standing just behind me. Story number 2, the silent arcade. Who turns on the arcade games in a dead mall? That's what I tried to figure out, and I regret it. It started as just a dumb idea. Me, Tyler, and Mia wanted to do something fun, and maybe a little reckless, so we decided to check out the old mall downtown. It had been shut down for years, and people at school kept saying the arcade in the basement was haunted. I didn't believe it, obviously. We weren't there for ghosts. We just wanted to explore, take some pictures, and maybe scare each other a little. Typical bored teenager stuff. We found a way in through a broken service door around the back. Once we were inside, the place felt wrong. It was darker than I expected, even with our flashlights, and it smelled like mildew and dust. Everything was quiet except for the crunch of broken tiles under our shoes. The arcade was in the basement, down a long, narrow escalator. It hadn't worked in years, and every step echoed like we were walking into some kind of cavern. Tyler joked about us waking up a ghost, but his voice didn't have its usual confidence. I think he was starting to feel it too, that eerie, heavy quiet. The arcade was exactly like I remembered it from when I was a kid, but also not. The neon signs on the walls were dead, and the carpet was stained and torn. Dust covered everything, and the air felt heavy, like it hadn't moved in years. We walked around, shining our flashlights on the old games. There was a claw machine, a few pinball machines, and a row of racing simulators. None of them worked. Mia found an air hockey table, and we thought about playing, but the puck was gone. Then, out of nowhere, one of the racing games lit up. The sound of an engine roaring to life echoed through the arcade. We all jumped, spinning toward the noise. "What the hell?" Tyler muttered, his voice shaky. None of us had touched it. The screen glowed, showing the name of the game, Night Driver. I didn't remember that game being there. Mia grabbed her phone to record. "This is so creepy," she whispered. The screen flickered, and text appeared. "Insert coin to begin." I shook my head. "Okay, let's just go. This is too weird." But Tyler, of course, walked right up to the machine. "It's probably on some backup power or something," he said, even though none of us believed it. "Don't mess with it," Mia said, her voice sharp. "Seriously, Tyler?" But he didn't listen. He pulled a coin out of his pocket, gave us a grin, and dropped it into the slot. The machine beeped, and the game started. At first, it seemed normal. Tyler controlled a pixelated car driving down a straight highway, but after a few seconds, the road twisted, leading into a dark tunnel. Shadows started to appear on the screen, darting across the road. "Is it supposed to do that?" Mia asked, leaning closer. Tyler didn't answer. His hands were gripping the wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. The shadows on the screen weren't just part of the game, they were chasing him. The machine beeped again and the screen froze. A horrible, distorted screech came from the speakers, and a photo popped out of the machine's ticket slot. Mia picked it up, her hands trembling. "Oh my God," she whispered. It was a picture of Tyler, but he wasn't smiling or laughing. He looked terrified, his face frozen in an expression of pure fear. "Tyler?" I called out, turning toward him, but he was gone. The driver's seat was empty, and the wheel kept spinning on its own. The screen flashed again. Next player. Mia screamed, and I grabbed her arm. "We need to get out of here," I said. We ran. We sprinted up the escalator, through the empty mall, and out into the cold night air. We didn't stop running until we were blocks away, panting and shaking. "Where is he?" Mia cried, clutching the photo to her chest. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. The next day we went back. I don't know what we expected to find. Maybe Tyler standing there with a stupid grin saying it was all a prank. But the arcade was gone. The escalator that led to the basement was boarded up, like it had been sealed off years ago. No one believed us when we told them what happened. I still have the photo. It's faded now, but I can't bring myself to throw it away. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint hum of an arcade machine calling me back. If you found an old game in an abandoned mall, would you play it? Let me know in the comments. Story number 3, The Locked Door. Every abandoned mall has a story. But in this one, the story was locked behind a door, and for good reason. When I bought the place, I wasn't expecting anything weird. It was just another project, another way to make money. The mall had been shut down for years, and my plan was simple: gut the place, renovate it, and turn it into office space. It wasn't glamorous, but the price was right, and I'd dealt with rundown buildings before. At first, it seemed pretty standard. The main concourse was a mess: broken tiles, graffiti on the walls, ceiling leaks. It smelled like mildew and old carpet, and the whole place felt like it was holding its breath. I'd brought a contractor and a few workers with me to start the walkthrough, just to get a feel for what we were dealing with. That's when we found the door. It was tucked away in a corner near the old anchor store, a big steel door with a heavy padlock on it. Right away, something about it didn't sit right. It wasn't on any of the blueprints, and it didn't match the design of the rest of the mall. "What do you think it is?" I asked the contractor. He shrugged. "Storage room, maybe. Could be an old utility closet." But if that was the case, why was it padlocked? And why did the lock look so new? It didn't fit with the rest of the mall's decay, like someone had been here recently and didn't want anyone going inside. Of course, my curiosity got the better of me. I had one of the workers cut the lock off that same day. When the door creaked open, the smell hit us first. Musty and sour, like something had been rotting inside for years. We all stepped back, covering our noses. Inside was a children's play area. Or at least it used to be. The walls were painted in faded pastels, but they were covered in handprints, tiny, smudged, and all over the place. In the center of the room was a single rocking horse. It was old, wooden, with peeling paint and cracks in the seat. It sat there like it had been waiting for someone to play with it. "Creepy," one of the workers muttered, and I couldn't help but agree. Still, I figured it was just an old playroom. The mall probably had a daycare area back in the day. It was weird, sure, but not exactly supernatural. At least, that's what I told myself. The weirdness started almost immediately after we opened the door. The workers started losing tools. At first, just a hammer here or a screwdriver there. But by the end of the week, things were disappearing left and right. They'd leave something on one side of the mall and find it on the other. And then there were the noises. Several of the crew reported hearing kids laughing, faint and distant, like it was coming from the other end of the mall. It was always late in the afternoon, just as the light filtering through the broken skylights started to fade. I thought they were just trying to spook me. But one evening, as I walked past the playroom, I heard it too. It was soft at first, a single giggle, high-pitched and unmistakable. I froze, my hand hovering over the doorframe. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing through the empty hall. There was no answer. just the sound of the rocking horse creaking. When I stepped inside, the room was empty, but lying on the floor right next to the rocking horse was a photograph. It was old, yellowed at the edges, and showed a group of kids standing in the playroom. They were all smiling, but their eyes looked wrong, too wide, too lifeless. I took the photo with me, planning to ask the crew about it the next day. But when I got to the mall in the morning, there were more photographs everywhere. They were scattered across the playroom floor, all of them showing different kids, but always in the same room, always with those same eerie smiles. By the end of the week, half my crew had quit. The ones who stayed refused to go near the playroom, and I should have sealed the door right then and there. But I didn't. One night I stayed late to review the renovation plans. The mall was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being watched. As I passed the playroom, I saw her, a little girl standing in the middle of the room. She was small, maybe 6 or 7, with long dark hair and pale skin. She didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me. "Hey," I said, stepping toward the door. But the moment I crossed the threshold, she vanished. Before I could process what had just happened, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. And then the rocking horse started to move. At first it creaked slowly, back and forth, but then it picked up speed. Laughter erupted around me, high-pitched and echoing, coming from every corner of the room. The walls seemed to close in, the handprints darkening until they looked like smears of ash. I don't remember much after that, just the feeling of cold hands grabbing my arms, my legs, my chest, pulling me down. I woke up the next morning outside the door. The padlock was back in place, good as new. I don't know how I got out, and honestly, I don't want to know. I sealed the door that day, and this time, I made sure it would never open again. But I'll never forget those children's faces, or how they seemed so wrong. Would you have opened the door? What would you have done next? Share your thoughts below. Story number 4, Echoes of the Food Court. I always thought the food court was the heart of the mall, until I realized it was the soul too. I've been into photography for years, and there's something about abandoned places that's always drawn me in. They have this haunting beauty, like time just stopped and left everything behind. When I heard about the old mall on the edge of town, I knew I had to check it out. It had been closed for over a decade, but I found a way in through a broken loading dock. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. The stillness, the heavy air, the way every sound echoed back at me. The place was falling apart. Cracked tiles, broken skylights, graffiti covering the walls. I wandered the halls, snapping pictures of empty storefronts and the sad, forgotten mannequins still standing in some of the windows. Their faces were cracked and faded, like they were watching me. Creepy, sure, but nothing I hadn't seen before. Then I got to the food court. It was massive, bigger than I remembered from when I was a kid. Tables and chairs were scattered everywhere, covered in dust. The neon signs above the old restaurants were either broken or barely clinging to life, buzzing faintly in the silence. A rusty soda machine sat in the corner, its glass front smeared with dirt. I started taking pictures. The way the light filtered through the shattered skylights made for some amazing shots. That's when I heard it. It was faint at first, like murmured voices, just on the edge of hearing. I stopped, holding my breath, but the sound faded. It was probably just the wind. Old buildings make noise, right? I kept shooting, but the sounds didn't stop. Footsteps, quiet but deliberate, echoed across the food court. Then came the clink of utensils on plates and the low hum of conversation, like the place was suddenly alive again. I spun around, my heart pounding. The food court was empty, just rows of dusty chairs and tables. I told myself it was all in my head, but when I got home and uploaded the photos, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In one of the shots, there was a man sitting at a table. He wasn't there when I took the picture. I was sure of it. But there he was, clear as day. He was wearing a tattered suit, and his face, it wasn't right. His eyes looked hollow, and his mouth was slightly open, like he'd been caught mid-sentence. I clicked through the photos, my hands shaking. In another shot, there was a woman sitting in the corner, her head tilted at a strange angle. In another, a group of children stood by the soda machine. Their faces were blurred, but their eyes, those eyes were staring directly at the camera. They were in almost every shot, and they were all looking at me. I should have deleted the photos right then, but I couldn't. I needed to know what was going on. So I made a stupid decision. I went back. This time I brought an audio recorder. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought I'd get answers, or maybe I just wanted to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The food court was the same as before, but the air felt heavier, like the building was holding its breath. I set the recorder on one of the tables, hit record, and sat down. At first, there was nothing, just the creak of the building and the occasional drip of water from somewhere above. But then I heard them again. Footsteps. They were soft but steady, moving across the food court. I couldn't see anything, but the sound was getting closer. Then came the voices. They were faint at first, like whispers just out of reach. But they grew louder, more distinct. "Why are you here?" I froze. It wasn't just a random sound, it was a question, directed at me. I turned around, scanning the room, but it was empty. The voices stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, from the recorder, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was my own voice. "You shouldn't have come." I didn't say that. I grabbed the recorder and bolted. I didn't stop running until I was out of the mall, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. When I got home, I smashed the recorder. I didn't want to hear what else might have been on it. I never went back to that mall. I deleted the photos, but it doesn't matter. I can still see their faces in my head. And sometimes, late at night, I hear it again. The faint hum of the food court, like it's calling me back. Would you have gone back? What would you have done? Share your thoughts below. Story number 5, the escalator that never stops. I used to think escalators were the safest way to travel. You step on, let the machine do the work, and step off. Simple, right? But there's an escalator in the old Starlight Mall that changed everything I thought I knew. It started when my cousin Danny dared me to explore the place with him. He'd heard stories about weird things happening there, lights flickering on in the middle of the night, shadows moving in the corners. We were both bored, and the idea of sneaking into an abandoned mall seemed like the perfect mix of stupid and fun. We climbed through a busted window near the back entrance and stepped inside. The place was a wreck. Graffiti everywhere, broken tiles, puddles of stagnant water. The air smelled like mold and old plastic. Danny laughed. "Creepy, huh?" I rolled my eyes. "It's just a mall. Let's check it out and go home." We wandered around, taking pictures with our phones and joking about how this place must have been during its heyday. The mannequins left in the windows looked like they'd been through a war, missing limbs, faces cracked and faded. Then we found the escalator. It was in the middle of the mall, leading down to the lower level where the movie theater used to be. Unlike everything else, it was still running. The soft hum of its motor filled the air, and the steps kept cycling endlessly, even though the mall hadn't had power in years. "That's weird," Danny said, stepping closer. "We should leave," I told him, already feeling uneasy. But Danny was Danny, curious to a fault. He grinned and put one foot on the escalator. "Come on, don't be a chicken." I hesitated, but I didn't want to let him go down there alone, so I followed him. The escalator felt strange under my feet. It wasn't smooth like normal. It jolted slightly with every step, like it was struggling to keep moving. The lower level was pitch black, Danny turned on his phone's flashlight, and the weak beam barely cut through the darkness. The air down there was colder, damp, and heavy with the smell of mildew. We walked around for a bit, finding old movie posters still stuck to the walls. Most of them were for films I'd never heard of, movies with strange titles like The Silent Audience and Endless Night. "Let's go back up," I said, my voice shaking a little. Danny nodded, but just as we turned to leave, we heard it, a faint, rhythmic thumping sound coming from somewhere nearby. "Did you hear that?" Danny whispered. "Yeah," I said, gripping my phone tighter. "Let's go." We started walking back toward the escalator, but the sound followed us, getting louder. It wasn't footsteps, it was more like something heavy being dragged across the floor. We reached the escalator and froze. There was a figure at the top standing in the faint light from the broken skylights above. At first I thought it was a mannequin, but then it moved. It stepped onto the escalator, its jerky movements unnatural, like it didn't know how to walk. It was tall, its body warped and wrong, with arms that hung too long and a head that tilted at an impossible angle. "Go!" Danny hissed, shoving me toward the steps. We ran up the escalator as fast as we could, but no matter how quickly we climbed, it felt like we weren't getting anywhere. The steps seemed to stretch on forever, and the hum of the motor grew louder, almost deafening. I glanced back and saw the figure moving toward us, its long arms dragging along the handrails, its head jerking from side to side like it was searching for something. "Keep going!" Danny yelled, but his voice sounded distant, like it was coming from far away. Finally, after what felt like hours, we stumbled off the top of the escalator and collapsed onto the floor. When I looked back, the escalator was empty. The figure was gone. We didn't stick around to find out where it went. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, that my mind was playing games with me. But Danny called me later, his voice shaking. "You need to check your phone," he said. I opened my photo gallery and froze. There were pictures I hadn't taken, blurry shots of me and Danny on the escalator, the figure standing just behind us. In the last photo, it wasn't on the escalator anymore. It was standing at the broken window we'd climbed through. I haven't been back to that mall since, and I never will. But sometimes, when I'm near an escalator, I hear the faint hum of its motor and feel like something's watching me. Would you have gotten on that escalator? Let me know in the comments.